today we're here with a good friend, award-winning podcaster of Entrepreneurs on Fire, an awesome person, John Lee Dumas.
If there's one thing that's true, people will beat a path to the doorstep of the number one solution to their problem. So from day one, I created the number one solution to a real problem. There was no daily podcast that was being given to the world for free. There was an interview of another inspiring entrepreneur. The day that I launched Entrepreneurs on Fire was the best daily podcast interviewing entrepreneurs. It was the worst daily podcast interviewing entrepreneurs. It was the only daily podcast interviewing entrepreneurs.
Welcome to the Uncommon Entrepreneur Podcast, where we highlight top entrepreneurs, investors, and game changers focused on a hyper-global with a hyper-local perspective, where you leave with successful tips from entrepreneurs and investors on how to improve your life and in business.
So today we're here with a good friend, an awesome person, John Lee Dumas. He's award-winning podcaster of Entrepreneurs on Fire. Has interviewed some of the top people in the world, Tony Robbins, Gary Vee, tons of others, author of the book, The Common Path to Uncommon Success. And it just happens to be a coincidence that we're also the uncommon entrepreneurs, but we love it. There's something to say about that. Maybe we'll dive into that more in the episode. I'm Brian Bordry.
I'm Drew Cutcomb.
We're your hosts, and we're excited to be here with John today.
And I'm fired up. I mean, it took me a little while to get air dried, but this nice Puerto Rican breeze made it happen, so I'm all dried off. I'm ready to go and dive right in.
That's awesome. We're here in sunny Puerto Rico in Palmas Del Mar, Humacao, at your home. Appreciate the invitation.
Always.
Yeah.
We got a good view, if you can tell. But let's kind of dive in a little bit. There's a chance that some people don't know who you are. So give us a little background on John Lee Dumas, or who you might hear called JLD.
Sure. Well, I'm just a country boy. I'm from the state of Maine. Grew up there for the first 18 years of my life in a very small town. Went to college on an Army scholarship. So after college, I served as an officer in the U.S. Army for 8 years. Did a 13-month tour of duty in Iraq as a tank platoon leader, which means I was in charge of 4 tanks, M1A1 Abrams, and 16 men. After my time in the service, I bopped around in a bunch of different careers, tried corporate finance, commercial real estate, went to law school. None of it was for me. Luckily, I found the medium of podcasting, and this was back in 2012. And I decided to launch the first daily podcast, interviewing the world's most successful entrepreneurs. That was 11 years ago. That was 4,164 episodes ago.
Not that he's counting.
That was over 150 million listens ago, and the show is currently getting over 2 million listens a month. And I literally have a studio within 30 feet of where we're sitting right now, where I go once a week and I interview 7 amazing entrepreneurs to keep that flow going of releasing an incredible interview with an amazing entrepreneur 7 days a week, 365 days a year. We moved to lovely Puerto Rico 7 years ago now. We essentially moved directly to Palmas Del Mar after trying a couple months on the other side of the island. And we bought this home back in July of 2016, and we will never leave.
That's awesome. So why do you love Palmas Del Mar and Puerto Rico so much that you'll never leave?
I love Puerto Rico. For one, it's a enchanted island. That is the nickname of Puerto Rico, and it's true. It is very enchanting. I feel enchanted by this island. It's paradise. It's beautiful. The native Puerto Ricans, Boricuas, are amazing humans. They just are so welcoming and warm and fun. And it's a great culture. It's a beautiful location. The tax benefits are fantastic, which we may or may not be getting into at some point during this conversation. And it just kind of allows me to say, you know what? I grew up for 18 winters in Maine, and I never have to experience another cold, wet, dark winter in my life. And that makes me very, very happy.
Awesome. Well, we understand winters. Drew and I are both from Minnesota. Although we met here in Puerto Rico, that's how it tends to happen. We were just saying before this, John's kind of like an East Coaster through and through, from north to south, north of Maine, down to Puerto Rico, as north and east and south as you can get in the U.S. as well as, I mean, we're on the east side of the island.
On the East Coast. And like you asked about Palmas Del Mar specifically.
Yeah, tell us a little bit more.
We weren't like looking to find a gated community. That wasn't our number one goal. But after we came here and explored the island, and we went all over. We went north, south, east, west, in the middle. Like we checked every part of this amazing island out, which was a really cool experience. We did find that the home that we wanted was in Palmas Del Mar. And again, that was 7 years ago. And since then, we've seen this community grow, and it's just an incredible place to live. There's 17 restaurants, 2 golf courses, 20 tennis courts, 6 pickleball courts, fitness club, beach club. New things are happening all the time. Of course, we're kind of built a little bit on this rise of a hill. So if you can see the view behind us, at different times, you see the incredible Caribbean, Vieques Island, Culebra, St. Thomas, St. John, the whole east coast of Puerto Rico is all visible. And this is the kind of home that I dreamed of that existed in the Caribbean. And so when we found it, we locked it in. And as I mentioned before, we'll never leave.
So give us some more context to kind of like the community and the lifestyle that you found here to people that maybe aren't familiar with that.
I love the overall Puerto Rico vibe, and the people that end up coming to Puerto Rico from the States that kind of give Palmas Del Mar its vibe. They really kind of fit into a funnel of 3 categories. Number one, they're very financially successful individuals. That's why they're looking for a place to legally spend less money in taxes. They're also very adventurous. I mean, to come to an island in the Caribbean takes a little bit of adventure. And they're location independent, meaning they can run their business from anywhere potentially in the world. And that combination, like that kind of trifecta going down this funnel, just spits out this really unique, cool human being that I know you guys have met up in San Juan, and of course in Palmas Del Mar, and Dorado, and Rincon, and the different spots around Puerto Rico where it does seem people from the States seem to congregate. They're just this same kind of energy, the same vibe, this openness, this adventureness that they have. And that's what Palmas Del Mar is made up of. And we just love the fact that there's a K through 12 academy literally like 200 yards from here. I have a son that potentially by the time this is live will have joined us in this world as our first child. And I am foreseeing, my son going to this academy and at 14 years old, giving him a golf cart that he can just drive himself down the road to the academy. And I love the idea that we have that kind of opportunity. And who knows what the future will bring. But I definitely see at least one of our potential futures being that.
That's awesome. So before we dive too much into all of that, let's rewind a little bit to kind of how you got here on the podcasting front. So you've done a number of different things. You said you tried a bunch of things until you found the medium of podcasting. Walk us through a little bit, kind of like how you came to decide on interviewing someone every day. Let's dive into that a little bit more detail.
Yeah, well, first off, thank you for giving the shout out of the book. I mean, that's really the kind of pinnacle of what I've done over the past 11 years, interviewing 4,000 entrepreneurs and counting. And it's really that book where I go into super detail about your question specifically, which was what was my mindset back in 2012? And that mindset was, man, podcasting is an amazing platform. It's an amazing medium. It's still new, it's early, which is kind of cool and fun. But even though that it's early and new and not a ton of people are doing it, and again, this was back in 2012, I still knew that I was not going to be a good podcaster. I was not going to be a good host, communicator, speaker, facilitator of communications. I was just not going to be any of those things because I had never done any of those things before. So I said, well, if I'm not going to be that good at something, I can't just do what everybody else is doing. I've got to do something different, unique, and special. And so I dug down from my big idea of podcasting into a niche, which I said, well, what's something that I feel like is missing in the podcast space? What is a void that's not being filled? And it was quantity. There was some great podcasts interviewing entrepreneurs once a week, twice a month, and they were doing a great job. But I was complaining as a consumer of that content saying, well, I just listened to the last episode. I've got to wait 2 more weeks or 7 more days till the next interview goes live. Like, I need that kind of inspiration every single day as I'm driving to work, as I'm in the gym, whatever. And so I said, okay, that can be where I niche. That can be where I'm unique and special. So I'm going to create the first daily podcast interviewing the world's most successful entrepreneurs. And guess what? The day that I launched Entrepreneurs on Fire was the best daily podcast interviewing entrepreneurs. It was the worst daily podcast interviewing entrepreneurs. It was the only daily podcast interviewing entrepreneurs. So I always tell people, I say, listen, identify a niche that's not being filled now. And that can either be from the fact that you will be the only person doing that thing, or the competition is just so poor you can come in and smash them day one and become the best. Because if there's one thing that's true in this world that I found, interviewing over 4,000 entrepreneurs, is people will beat a path to the doorstep of the number one solution to their problem. And they will ignore every other solution to infinity, because people want the best solution to their problem. That's what people want. That's what people need. That's what people demand. So from day one, I created the number one solution to a real problem. There was no daily podcast that was being given to the world for free. There was an interview of another inspiring entrepreneur talking about their successes, their failures, their lessons learned, their strategies, their tips, their tactics. There was nothing that existed there. So I filled that void. I created a solution, which was the number one solution because it was the only solution. It was one of one. And because of that, I won. And so many people these days are just saying, you know what? Somebody's doing something that's working. They're winning. I'm going to copy them. And they just become a pale, weak imitation of somebody else. And nobody wants a pale, weak imitation of somebody else. Nobody wants the second best of somebody else. They want the best. And they want the unique, real, genuine version of you, of what you're going to create. And that was my key back in 2012. Some of it I did intentionally. Some of it I just got lucky because I thought it might be the right thing to do, and it ended up being the right thing to do. But at the end of the day, it worked, and I am really glad it did.
That's awesome.
So obviously, that's 10, 11 years ago. Things are, we're in 2023 at the moment. How have you seen the podcasting world evolve, and, how would you recommend somebody look at it from that perspective now?
It's evolved at an unbelievable clip. I mean, this was 11 years ago I launched the podcast. Since then, podcasting's become known to pretty much everybody on some level. Not everybody consumes the content, but everybody knows about podcasting, what it is. They've heard of it. They know somebody that has a podcast or listens to podcasts. And that just wasn't the case back in 2011. So there's such a bigger potential audience these days than there used to be. So that's really exciting for one. Number two, what I've also seen is launching a show like Entrepreneurs on Fire in today's world does not work. Because you can't just be another broad, vague show when there's already some great shows out there. Why would anybody listen to somebody launching essentially the same show as me, but they're a lot worse at it? Because I've done it 4,000 times. I'm obviously pretty good at what I do. Finally, it took me a while, but I got there. And so those shows fail, but the shows that win and the shows that succeed, and if I was to snap my fingers and start a brand new show, I would say, what is a really exceptionally unique problem that I want to solve, that I can solve? How can I just become the best person to solve that problem? Like here we are sitting, out by the pool right now, and I would say, listen, I'm about to have a child, like in 5 weeks, like there's gonna be a baby in this world. And I'm gonna learn a lot over those 5 months post-birth about sleeping and how to help all that stuff.
Next 20 years.
Lack of sleeping and all of those things. Like I'm gonna learn so much. Like I may look at some point in the next couple months and be like, is there a podcast that's just focused on helping dads in the first 3 months post-birth on getting their child to sleep, or what role the father can play, or tips, tools, and tactics just for dads, just in the first 3 months? Like that kind of unique specificity niche, that show has a chance to really succeed. Because guess what? There's brand new fathers being born every day. And by being born, I mean I'm going to be born a brand new father in 5 weeks, give or take. And I'm going to go to Apple Podcasts or to Google, and I'm going to search, what do I do as a dad with my baby? And if I saw a podcast that said, dads, 0 to 3 months, help your baby sleep better, I am listening to every single one of those episodes. But if I went on and just saw how parents can help, solve sleep issues in the first, 16 months of their child, I'd be like, okay, that might help, but that's not really exactly where I'm at now. I need that specificity. And those are the shows, by the way. Those type of podcasts have a big chance of being successful.
And that's a lot because podcasting is now ubiquitous and almost everyone knows what it is. There's enough people in the world looking for anything that you can be super niche, very focused, and be insanely successful.
The listenership is massive now. They're looking for specific content. Give it to them.
Yeah, that's awesome. So, a couple other things. That's kind of how you've seen things change. One of the things we were wondering about, I consider you a podcasting purist because you're still very just audio. What are your thoughts on video? Rogan, all these all have video as well now. Obviously started before video was much of a thing, but what are your thoughts on that? Do you plan on bringing video into things? Do you think that matters in your viewership or listenership? Walk us through that.
I think video is the way to go. It's such a better platform when it comes to just overall content production, not even talking about podcasts specifically, but just overall content production, because you can repurpose it on all the best platforms.
Sure.
YouTube, Instagram, Facebook, you name it. Like, they're all more video focused. Rogan's, massive listenership. So many of them were on YouTube. Lewis Howes, same thing. Other people who have done that, they've done it right and they've leveraged those platforms. The reality is, I would not be the only daily podcast interviewing entrepreneurs if I did a video show, because just logistically, the amount of added bandwidth, energy, time, effort could not have been possible. I couldn't do 365 interviews a year of video. I'm not saying nobody could do that. There's a human out there that could do that, I'm sure.
Sure.
But that was not me. That was not the business that I was looking to build or the cadence that I wanted to create. You guys saw what it took to set up for this one interview today. I'm sure you can imagine you could not do this 365 times a year. You can do it 50 times a year if you want to do a weekly show. You could have a studio set up in San Juan and maybe, get a cadence of a couple times per week, but you would really have to be committing your lives to something to do a daily show on video every single day. So because of that, I just had to make the decision that I'm gonna go audio only and stay audio only. And my overall listenership has suffered as a result. Like, my show's not as big as it otherwise would be, but my show actually exists because I didn't go that route. So I see I would have built something that would have run me into the ground years and years and years ago, or create something that's sustainable that I can do, and I know that I can just continue doing for the foreseeable future. Guys, I spend 5 hours, 1 day per week, doing 7 back-to-back interviews in a room there, and that's it for my show. And then I get to sit right where I'm sitting, enjoy the view, enjoy the breeze, enjoy the other aspects of my life. That's the business that I built.
Yeah.
And that was my choice. And I encourage anybody listening, watching, hearing this right now, that's what you need to be intentional about. What kind of business do you want to create, and then go after that.
Yeah, and that's huge. And I love today we have so much more in resources as well. We work with Parea Space, and shout out to the guys behind the cameras right now. They do have a studio in Guaynabo technically, but next to San Juan. So we can go in there and they set things up, but it is a lot. And they'll tell you too, because they're the ones doing editing and all the other things.
If I was launching another show, it would be a video show. It would be a different cadence. It'd be once a week. It'd be a couple times a week. I would go in, one day and shoot, 8, 10, 12 hours of content in one day. Yeah. And then break it up and release it over the course of a few weeks or whatever that would be. And that's the way to do it.
Yeah.
So obviously, if you pick up the Podcaster Paradise book over there, give us some context to what you would recommend, how somebody gets started, and how your journals and kind of the process kind of goes into that.
Yeah, well, just to kind of clarify, so I've created a few things over my 11 years, luckily. Yeah. One of them is the Mastery Journal, which you can see right there, and that's a journal that I created back in 2017, which is all about mastering productivity, discipline, and focus. That's what I've been able to create a multi-million-dollar net profit a year business, working essentially 1 day per week, literally. That journal tells you how. The Freedom Journal's the first journal that I ever created. This is how to accomplish your number one goal in 100 days. And this is, I think, a great lesson. This is me in 2016, so 5 years into my business, asking my audience, what's your biggest struggle right now? And my audience told me, we hear all of your guests on your show talking about setting goals and accomplishing goals, and that makes sense, but where do we start? So I created what is the absolute beginning, start, and finish of that, which is how to set a SMART goal, specific, measurable, attainable, relevant, time bounds, and how to accomplish that goal in 100 days. And it's a step-by-step process with 10-day sprints, quarterly reviews. By day 100, you will have accomplished your number one goal. And I bring that up because I asked my audience what they needed.
Yeah.
They told me. I delivered it to them, and then I put it on Kickstarter, and I said, you told me what you needed. Here it is. Prove to me that you'll pay for it, because people vote with their wallet.
Yep.
In 33 days, we did $453,000 in sales of a $39 journal. It became the sixth highest grossing publishing campaign of all time on Kickstarter. Just shocked people because, this was a journal. This is not even a book. And it was just what people needed and what people wanted, though. And it just caught momentum, which is why a year later I followed up with that journal. And then a few years later I launched this, which is my first traditionally published book, which is more in that traditional phase of this is a 17-step roadmap to financial freedom and fulfillment. Going back even further to your initial kind of question or a comment about Podcasters Paradise, that was the same thing. I did not launch Entrepreneurs on Fire, my podcast, thinking that I was going to create a single tutorial about podcasting, because I was still new at podcasting. But my audience kept saying, John, how are you doing this? How are you doing that? What is an MP3? How do you upload to a media host? And I'm just like, I barely know what I'm doing, but I'm one chapter ahead of all of these people. You think back to high school, your math teacher who you thought was so smart, he was probably smart, or she was smart, but they were just one chapter ahead. The night before that class, they studied that chapter, and then you thought they were brilliant because they knew everything. They just knew one chapter ahead of where you were. That's all I knew. And that's all where I was in my knowledge base. So then I launched in 2013 Podcasters Paradise, which was fitting when I launched it. I was living in San Diego. It's much more fitting now that I live here in Puerto Rico. But I launched Podcasters Paradise, and now it's been running for 9 years.
Wow.
It's the biggest podcasting course and community in the world. Podcasters Paradise is where we teach people how to create, grow, and monetize their podcast. And guess what? That wasn't my idea. This journal wasn't my idea. That journal wasn't my idea. It was my audience telling me what they needed, what they wanted, and then me deciding how I was going to create the solution and provide it to them.
Yeah, and that's huge. Feedback, data, essentially, of what people want or don't want, and the consistency that you had allowed you to do that in a shorter period of time as well. If you have daily podcasts and you have that much interaction happening, you can actually make those decisions, pump out products or whatever it needs to be to service your community. Which brings me kind of into another maybe semi-related topic. When we come to data, feedback, all of that, I've been playing around with a lot of different AIs. Where do you see artificial intelligence, if you see it, having an effect in the podcasting world and specifically in what you're working on?
So I know very little about AI. I played around on ChatGPT, on Midjourney, on all the fun things. And so I feel like I do know enough to know that it's going to change everything. How it's going to change everything, I don't quite know. I think it's going to make a lot of tasks easier.
Sure.
I think it's going to make some tasks irrelevant. I think it's going to make some tasks even more important because you need to learn how to do certain things differently when you're operating in that world and when you're integrating and operating with something like artificial intelligence. So it's kind of one of those things. It's inevitable. It's, there's only so many things that are inevitable in our world.
Sure.
In our lifetime, the internet was inevitable. I believe the blockchain's inevitable, however that may look, whether that be Bitcoin, one of the other cryptocurrencies, on some way, shape, and form, that is going to be an inevitable part of our world.
Yeah.
And I believe artificial intelligence is an inevitable part of our world. I just don't know how and what that's going to look like, but I'm eyes open, and I'm learning from smart people. I'm interviewing people on my show about it. That's one of my favorite ways to learn, is I get to reach out to the best people in the industry and ask them specifically to come on my show.
Yeah.
And then the questions that I have for them, they get to answer, and I get to hear their answers, and that's how I learn.
Yep, and that's awesome. So a couple things to just hit on. I do want to get to NFTs at some point, but we'll circle back to that in a second. To wrap up kind of this podcasting journey and best practices and other things, you also have some very transparent data, and I think you're showing like your income statements, or you're showing financials of how you're doing, and it's out there.
Unique.
Yeah, walk us through, why'd you start doing that? What's the response been? Help us understand that better.
So back in 2011, when I was pre-Entrepreneurs on Fire, I was trying to figure out, like, is this online marketing world real? Can you really be an entrepreneur, a businessman, a woman, and create something of value and make money? Or is everybody just a bunch of shysters? I just didn't know, because I'd never been down that road before. I've been very traditional with law school, Army, corporate finance. And I remember finding a couple guys that were publishing either monthly and semi-annually income reports where they were just detailing out all the specifics about how they were making money. And I said, well, wait a second, these individuals are sharing exactly how they're doing it, and they're validating it, so I know it's true. That's very comforting to me, that's very exciting to me, and that's giving me some trust in this area, in this part of the world. And I remember just at that moment being like, if I ever start generating revenue in the online marketing world, I'm going to do the same. I'm going to create monthly income reports where I'm going to bring my accountant on to validate the report, to share a tax tip. I'm going to bring my lawyer on to share a legal tip and to also validate the report. People that are putting like their businesses, their livelihoods on the line, if they were for whatever reason to falsify, so there's just no reason for them to do that, so that I could just give my audience complete trust into the numbers that we were sharing, to what we were doing. And from day one, it was just such a huge hit. People loved it. They were just excited by it. They learned lessons from it. They learned what to do. They learned what not to do, and everything in between. And we just published our 122nd income report in a row. That's 122 consecutive months.
That's awesome.
Your consistency is impressive. Obviously, the authenticity is something that you're characterized from too. I think as I look, when you hear the report, if you haven't checked it out, do that. Check out his podcast in general. Obviously, a lot to learn. Specifically, sponsorships seem like it's a major part of your revenue. Can you give us some context, and maybe people listening, so you have an ultimate guide on your website that people obviously can go to later to get more context, but like how does somebody, monetize a podcast successfully through sponsorships?
Absolutely. eofire.com. That's our website. That's where the income reports are, the guides are, everything that we share, all of our free content. We have a lot of great free courses for entrepreneurs that we post there. So eofire.com. And we're really very intentional about what we share and about how we share, because we're always saying, how can we give the most free value to our listeners? And there's actually a quote that really sparked my juices back in 2012 by Albert Einstein, which was, try not to become a person of success, but rather a person of value. And up to that point, honestly, Drew, I was chasing success. I was trying to become a person of success.
I've been there.
And then I said, well, Albert Einstein's a pretty smart guy, and if he says I should become a person of value, why don't I try that? And that was me giving free value in the form of a podcast, in the form of our income reports, just giving free value over and over again. Like that was my cadence, that was my goal, that was my desire, was to give that free value. So when it comes to our income reports, it's pretty interesting. If you look over the past 11 years, we have a pie chart every month that shows where our income comes from. And it's really shifted over time. Like in the early days, Podcasters Paradise made up a huge percentage of our revenue. Affiliate made up a huge percentage of our revenue, another couple years. Books, journals made up huge revenue, pieces of that pie in different years. And then over time, it's just developed and continued to change and adjust just as the world does, our business has as well. And as we sit now, which of course can and probably will change in the future, a huge majority of our revenue is sponsorships. You know, we have long-term sponsorship deals. We have a 7-figure 2-year deal with HubSpot. We have multiple annual deals with other sponsors that are fantastic that sponsor every single month. So we have this recurring long-term relationships with companies that want to get in front of our audience, that want to get in front of Fire Nation to make sure that our listeners know their products, their services, what they are. So sponsorships is a huge deal. What I always tell people when they start off, remember what we were talking about earlier. You're building an audience. You shouldn't be rushing into sponsorships right away when you have a small audience, because you won't get paid that much money off of that, 'cause it's a small audience. But you have products, you have services. You can offer coaching or do masterminds or do any number of things. Why not build a universe with your podcast and then offer your products, your services, your availability to your audience? Keep it in that hemisphere for a while before you break off and say, okay, now I'm at 5,000 listens a month, 10,000 listens per month. Now I can maybe start bringing in some real money with sponsorships. So I like to say there's an evolution to that. It's not launch a podcast day 1, day 2, start taking sponsors. It's launch a podcast, build a community, serve that community, create solutions for their problems, offer to them in the form of sponsorships on your show. You should be promoting your stuff on your show. And then if and when you get to a point where maybe a sponsor approaches you, or you're big enough where you can start kind of talking to different sponsors through brokers, etc., then you go for it.
Yeah, no, wise words on that front. So diving into a little bit more for running things for so long, obviously you're the face of everything, but I'm sure there's people behind the scenes who help you get to where you are and the accomplishments you've attained. Walk us through, what's your team look like in general?
And expenses in general too.
Yeah, and honestly, that's evolved a lot over the years.
Of course.
6 years ago, we were actually up to 14 people on our team, which for some people that sounds like a lot, for some people a little bit. For us at the time, it was a lot. And then after a while, it felt like a lot. So we actually were like, okay, what kind of business do we want to run here in Puerto Rico? Lifestyle business first. And we started kind of just trimming that team down over time into what we thought was the perfect size team, which is actually where we're at now, which may change in the future. We may grow our team back up to 14 to 40, or we may keep it where it's at right now, which is 3 virtual assistants based out of the Philippines, and myself and my wife, Kate. It's the 5 of us. We are the Entrepreneurs on Fire team. We are Team Fire. It's an incredibly lean business. I mean, we typically, we post this in our income reports, this one line that is our percentage of net profit to overall gross revenue. We're typically between 80 to 90% every month, which is unheard of.
Yeah.
But it's been our focus for 11 years, and really our laser focus for the last 5 to 6 years. So we've got there over time. You know, we used to be in the 40s and the 50s and the 60s, and now we just continue to make that happen. So we have 3 amazing virtual assistants, one that's been with us for 12 years, 9 years, and 8 years. That's the 3 that we have. They have important roles. They know their job, and they do it without us having to micromanage them. And then there's myself and Kate, and we just kind of are running the team, doing our thing. Kate, you know, she deals with all the sponsors, the reads, the operations, the taxes. She does all that stuff. And I'm just the voice, the face, and having these conversations with cool people like you.
Awesome. So walk us through, how is it working with your wife through this process, and maybe what are some tips that others could glean from on how to do that effectively to have a loving, lasting relationship and success, melding those two?
It's not for everybody. And my wife kind of laughs when I say this, but I was in a lot of relationships over my years before meeting her. None of those relationships could I ever have pictured working with an individual. Some of them were very good, healthy relationships, but none of them would have been good working and intimate relationships simultaneously. It just wouldn't have worked. Kate just ended up being kind of that diamond in the rough for me. We were the right fits, personality-wise, energy-wise, what we wanted to do, what we wanted to build. And so it worked. It will not work for everybody. It will probably damage more relationships than it will help. But at the end of the day, I do definitely know there are some successful couples like us doing this, and I really do enjoy it because I love being able to have like this aligned relationship with the person that I'm spending my life with. At the same time, I think that there can be some benefits to being in a relationship where you're not working together, so you have different things to talk about.
Sure.
Sometimes Kate and I gotta like give each other little virtual slaps in the face because we're like, stop talking about work. Like we have other things to talk about, and that can be a problem. So you've got to really catch yourself. But for us, it's worked for 11 years.
Wow.
I don't see that changing because for whatever reason, it just works for us, and we're very fortunate there. I do think our child's going to bring a different dynamic into the world for sure. But, Kate's been very adamant is that she doesn't want to lose that part of her life. She loves being a part of this.
Sure.
She doesn't want to just become a mother. I don't want to just become a father. Like, we want to have a balanced life where we're able to do more than just that. So time will tell.
Sure.
That's where we're at right now.
Yeah, well, and that's the beauty of how you've structured things. A lifestyle business that is doing well is you can be a mother and a father way more than a lot of people, probably most people in the world, because you've narrowed down to your working hours and tied that in really well.
I really believe my child's first words, or at least his first sentence, will be, "Dad, leave me alone." Because, listen, all I do all day right now is sit here. So when he's born, I'm going to be sitting with him being like, hi, hi. And he's probably going to be like, psh.
Awesome. Well, we'll follow up on that. We'll keep tabs on how that's going.
It could be a problem.
We'll catch those first words. Awesome.
So maybe let's get into the blockchain, the NFT side of the equation. I know you launched a podcast on that theme. Obviously, for those that aren't familiar with NFTs, they're non-fungible tokens. It fits within kind of the blockchain, multiverse, I guess we'll say, and so forth. What's kind of your thoughts on the future of how you see that technology evolving and if it applies to podcasting or just in general, I guess? And
well, I'll start with the broader blockchain. Like, again, being here in Puerto Rico, there's a lot of appeal. A lot of people do call it Crypto Rico for a reason, because when you do live here and you're under one of the tax acts, you will pay 0% capital gains. So there's like this added appeal of like, wow, I mean, like that'd be amazing if I made X number of dollars and pay 0% on that. So there's some appeal for that and for just other investing in general. So that is kind of one thing that has attracted a lot of those individuals to the island. So then of course you interact with them. Sometimes you catch up into their excitement, their enjoyment, and their overall just positivity and optimism for the space. And I have a lot of friends who are that. And let's be honest, it was a fun ride, and there's a lot of cool things that were happening. And I really understood the technology, and I got what was happening, and the non-fungible side of it, meaning that you could be proven on the blockchain that you and you alone own this thing that is scarce, and that could become more valuable over time. And I had some successes. I definitely had a lot of failures in the space within blockchain, cryptocurrency, and NFTs in general. I am a believer that in some way, shape, or form, all of those things are coming back. Blockchain is going to be a very important part of our future. I truly believe that. I think cryptocurrencies are going to be playing a huge role in that. I think there's some amazing companies right now in cryptocurrency that are solely leveraging blockchain and building amazing things that are going to be critical in our future. And I also believe that NFTs are going to become a very interesting collector and fun role in our future, again, as they were a couple of years ago. And everything has its cycle. Sometimes baseball cards are up, sometimes they're down, sometimes art is up, art is down. And we're kind of in one of those cycles right now. So who knows what the future may bring. But I believe that all of those things are going to play a really interesting role in our future. And so I like to use the word bullish because I am very bullish on all of those.
I would say I agree on all of that.
Right.
And again, and how that evolves is to be determined. But there's a lot of things happening that people don't see, and that's when you know that it's actually really working is when you don't realize. I mean, if you look, I think you can search like how many times was the internet proclaimed like dead or not going to be a big thing or it's a fad or whatever, and that was the internet, and no one would dispute that now. Same thing with Bitcoin, I think, has died like 600 times or something over the last X number of years, and blockchain in general. But it's when you don't even realize that you're using blockchain or whatever the technology is. It doesn't even matter what it is. That's when you've really made it. But everything is going to have its hype cycles. Everything is going to have its haters and whatnot. But from a technology side, that I got more into Bitcoin, for example, in 2011 for philosophical, oh, this is really cool, and I don't have to be censored by anyone or the government or anything to transfer value. That's neat. At the time, I was like, that's neat. So I spent all of it in 2012, and I'm not as rich as I could have been. But that being said,
most of us have a story like that.
yeah. But that being said, I've always held true to the technological aspect, the censorship resistance. We run our Uncommon Sovereignty Conference, which you've spoken at before, and you've been on panels for.
I actually bought one of my most valuable NFTs during that conference.
Really?
I brought my
Which one?
Fruit Pass.
Okay.
The Kevin Rose. Yeah.
Sweet. Well, good. We'll have to talk more about that with everyone later too. But from the sovereignty standpoint, owning and controlling your data, your money, anything that's important to you, valuables, verifying things that are physical. You have art on your wall that I can see from here. They're all NFTs.
Shout out to Gustavo Adolfo, who made this painting. I think it's in the shot, and so forth. Yeah, because the nice thing about NFTs and blockchain is it gives power to the artist, which I'm assuming you consider yourself one too, in the sense that you're creating content that is one of one. So maybe within that, what specific use case, maybe there's a company you know of that you want to shout out, but what would you find there to be valuable in if somebody created some kind of technology in what we're discussing?
So I think one of the best use case scenarios right now is XRP. I mean, what XRP and Ripple is doing in the financial settlement space. Instead of using things like SWIFT, which takes days and has incredibly high fees. We're talking settlements in seconds.
Yeah.
It is proven on the blockchain. Everything's traced. Everything's followed. And of course, the SEC is having a really field day trying to kind of batten these things down, but they've won some big cases against the SEC, and who knows what the future will hold. But I think that's an example of a company that's literally sitting on trillions and trillions of dollars in value if they can prove out what they're trying to build, which in a lot of ways they already are. It's just now, can they extrapolate out to the case that they want to and really become a day-to-day use case in a scenario like the financial settlement transactions.
Yeah, the day-to-day is important on that front for sure. Actually, a fun little story that's coming to mind. I realized, I think in 2015, I used to use this document signing platform. I think it was DocHub or HubDoc, one of the two.
I use that,
And I don't know if they still do, but I was wondering, I was like, sometimes it works really well. Sometimes I feel like it's lagging. And I looked and I found out it was utilizing the Bitcoin network for verifying. Because if you use DocuSign or something else, it gives you a timestamp of when something was electronically signed, whatever. It was actually running on Bitcoin. I'm like, that would explain why it's not a perfect, instant thing all the time. I was like, I've been using something utilizing blockchain or Bitcoin specifically for a couple of years, and I didn't even realize it. I don't know if they still do anymore, but for a time they were. And I was like, that's awesome.
That is cool.
But when you find those little pieces.
Behind the scenes.
Yeah, for sure. And I think for NFTs, just hitting on that a little bit, Andrew and I have had the privilege of working and advising with a group as well that does a lot of NFT work with data monetization and data markets, and so people, again, can own and control their data better and earn from that and have these different streams. So I think a lot of the things that will bring the most massive amount of value, as you were mentioning with settlements and things like that, aren't necessarily super sexy. I mean, there will be, and obviously we saw with pictures and other types of NFTs that are more visual and art focused, that's a piece. But I think a lot of the value, if not the majority of the value long term that will be created, is in those consistent, or a lot of micro things that are happening. Again, just transferring money in this case, or it could just be monetizing some other value you have in one way, shape, or form, which on the surface isn't that sexy, but super important.
Yeah, but your driver's license, getting your mortgage, tracing things back, property ownership. I mean, there's so many potentials that can be really exciting.
Yeah.
So we're here in Puerto Rico. You've hinted at the tax incentives. Maybe just to go into a little bit more context to people that aren't familiar with it and how it's applied to you and maybe people watching and how it could be applicable to them.
2015, I'm in San Diego, California, making millions of dollars a year in my business, and also writing a check for 7 figures a year to the government. And I was just like, wow, this is a great American success story. I created a business making millions of dollars. But man, I feel like the government's the winner here, because they're taking all my money right back. I was like 2.5 steps forward, 2 steps back. So I was making progress, but I didn't have like the bank account that I would think that somebody making millions of dollars a year would have. And there was an article that was sent to me by CNN that was kind of describing Puerto Rico, and back then it was called Act 20, Act 22. And I remember forwarding that article to my CPA and saying, tell me why I can't do this within 24 hours or you're fired. Because I had asked him about a month prior to that to legally find me ways to spend less money in taxes or to pay less money in taxes. And he took 24 hours, came back and said, John, I'm embarrassed. I can't believe I didn't know about this. This is perfect for somebody like you in your business, location independent, yada, yada. He's like, get on the next plane to Puerto Rico. So I went to Kate. I said, babe, I'm moving to Puerto Rico. I really want you to move with me, but I'm moving. And I know the person that I'm going to spend the rest of my life with would definitely get on that plane with me and go try a year adventure in Puerto Rico. Because if it doesn't work, we're coming back. If it does, we may never leave. And she said, let's roll. So within a couple months, we were in Puerto Rico, living here on the island, and we've never left. And I believe we'll never leave.
That's phenomenal. Yeah, I mean, that's a theme that we see in a lot of our different videos, but all from a different angle.
But let's get to numbers real quick.
Yeah, exactly.
Important. So I was spending or paying millions of dollars a year in taxes because I was paying 51% taxes, which
California,
sat down, it was 38% federal, 13% state.
Yeah.
And I sat down and I said, I'm working for the U.S. and state governments until June 15th of every year. So yay, New Year's. I wake up New Year's morning. Okay, for the next 6.5 months, literally, I'm working for the government. Everything I do, every penny I make is going to them. Mm-hmm. If I move to Puerto Rico, January 17th is the last day that I pay any taxes, because I'm going from 51% to 4%. And I think governments rarely do anything smart. Mm-hmm. I cannot commend the Puerto Rican government enough for coming up with what I consider a brilliant plan. And there's a lot of people that are like, oh, but you're coming here, you're only paying 4% taxes. I'm like, I'm paying 4% on millions of dollars of revenue that Puerto Rico would have otherwise seen $0 of.
Exactly.
So they're getting 4% of millions of dollars, which is a lot of money. I'm buying property. Housekeepers, lawn keepers, pool people. Yeah. I'm going to restaurants. I'm having family visit, friends visit. I mean, the amount of money that just I spend and bring to this island is astronomical. It is astronomical. And I'm one person. And there's thousands and thousands and thousands of people doing this. Like, the financial positive blueprints and imprints that I believe this has had on the island is unbelievable. I've had, many people say that they otherwise would not have stayed on the island like Boricuas. They said we would not have been able to stay on the islands if you weren't here, because we would have had to go to the States and find work. And that was one of the big problems for Puerto Rico for decades, was the brain drain.
Exactly.
Puerto Rico has amazing, brilliant people, hardworking people, smart people. Yep. They had to leave. And that's terrible for a place that's this size. 3.5 million people. Like, you need your smartest, hardest working people to stay and make this island even better. It's already a great island.
Yes.
Every place has room for improvement. Every city in America has massive room for improvement, and you need your best people here.
Yeah, and when you look at the data, and we won't go into that all right now, but on a later podcast we will, you do see, I have the privilege of working in economic development for the island, so I get to see, and we do reports. I think we have a report coming out this month even, showing job creation, and it's not just jobs that are low paying or anything. And the other thing too that I think is important for people to realize is all the business incentives are applicable to anyone. It's not only people who move here or anything like that. There's actually over 10,000 local businesses that utilize incentives, all the major businesses. I think, I don't want to misquote numbers, but there's very large percentages, if not majority percentages of all the income on the island generated from companies is incentivized in one way, shape, or form, because you kind of need to have that abundance growth mindset when you think about these incentives. Luckily, these incentives are additive. They're not taking away from other people. It's helping bring new money that wouldn't be here otherwise. So pretty much anything that comes from that is kind of new growth, new business, new jobs. And the average salary or salary compensation over the last few years has averaged like $66,000 for new jobs being created. That's over double the current average. So like the types of companies are moving down. I mean, there's every sort. There. You were just saying one person, like your small show from a people standpoint is still bringing millions in and of itself. But when you bring
economic value,
when you bring a multi-billion-dollar company hiring thousands of people, like holy crap, like the numbers do get astronomical. So plenty of rooms for improvement. I agree on that front, but it's been a really good step in the right direction. And I think for all those listening, especially those wanting to get into podcasting and entrepreneurship and everything, particularly those who are younger, the young entrepreneur incentive for 35 years and younger, paying zero tax on your first $500,000. We hit on that in one of our other interviews, so go ahead and check out the one that we did with Kevin actually. But that's phenomenal for anyone who's listening, especially just getting started, all the young entrepreneurs out there. Hopefully they'll expand it to not the young people only, but that being said, that's a great way to get started.
I love it.
So maybe transitioning as we close out into mindset, because I think something I admire about you that you're consistently exemplifying is like a positive mental attitude, which is the master key to riches in Napoleon Hill's book, and obviously other themes too. But like, what would you say is like an uncommon mental model that you've used to succeed and create what you've visualized and then manifested?
There's a lot, but I'll get into it one step at a time, because the first step is really simple. It's gratitude. Gratitude is so underutilized and it's so easy. I'll hold this journal up right here, the Freedom Journal. The first page every day for 100 days is, I am grateful for blank, and you fill it in. And it's actually the exact sentence is, something unique I am grateful for is, because I want to challenge people not just to put my kids, my kids, my kids. We get it. You're grateful for your kids. I believe you. I know I'll be grateful for my kids. But what's important about gratitude is not just to go into robot mode, it's to really be like, man, this onshore breeze that's coming in right now, that's just keeping us just barely cool enough. Like, I'm grateful for that breeze right now. That bird that just tweeted right there, like, and not, again, I'm just saying one thing. I'm not, don't sit there here your whole day and just like point out things. It's like one time, beginning of a day, think of something unique that you're grateful for. That will change just how you start to look at life. It's crazy how that works. But that's just step one of a morning routine that I've implemented that's really dialed in. Like, I have every single day, I wake up after at least 8 hours of sleep, and I'm out walking my dog for 3 miles. Like, I'm out on the street as the sun's rising. I'm getting the vitamin D, the breeze is hitting my face, and I'm walking back and forth. I'm listening to a podcast. I'm listening to an audiobook. I'm consuming positive content. I get back from that. I hit my gym right here. I do stretching, red light therapy, infrared sauna. I have a cold plunge. I do weight training multiple days per week right in there. And again, those are all things that I've added over time. You don't just wake up tomorrow and have that as your morning routine. I had one thing I'm grateful for. That's how I started. And then I added the next one thing, and I did that for a few months. And then over 11 years of being an entrepreneur, I've now grown this morning routine into where I'm 43 years old. I'm more healthy than I was when I was 33 years old when I launched this business. I feel great. I'm in Puerto Rico. I'm running a multi-million-dollar a year business. I'm working, very reasonable hours per week, and I'm doing all the things that I want to do, traveling, starting a family, doing this. And it all came from just doing one thing right first thing in the morning, and then slowly adding on to those things, so that by the time now 5 p.m. comes, the amount of like positive things that I've done mindset wise, mental wise, as well as health and wellness, putting the right foods in my body throughout the day will have added up to a fantastic result. And again, it's just by doing that one step at a time. So that'd be my one challenge for everybody is just for the next 30 days, wake up in the morning and say one thing that you're grateful for. See how that shifts your mindset, and then start to add other things every successive month until you get to a point where you're like, okay, my morning routine's 60 minutes. That's kind of getting a little long. Let's stay here for a while. Or let's find some ways to make it a little more efficient so it's only 45 minutes because I've got kids. I've got to get out and get to a job. I get all these things in life, but you'll figure things out if you take it one step at a time.
Yeah, I think that's super important. Just the adding on consistency, focus, one step at a time, as you've proven over 11 years, is a solid way to do it.
And that's what the Mastery Journal is all about. It's productivity, discipline, and focus. If you incorporate those three things in the 100 days, by the end of those 100 days, you'll be like, wow, like I've really got something going here.
So maybe focusing on focus.
Sure.
It seems we're in a world that's so distracting, and obviously you're in a position probably seeing a lot of opportunities. I can relate. How do you cut through the noise and activate focus in your life?
Listen, you have to realize one truth. Everybody in this world is trying to get your attention because they want you to buy their product, buy their service, watch their show, watch my show. Like, we're all trying to get your attention. And it will never stop. The bright, shiny object syndrome will always be there. This game is so addictive. This food is so tasty. This, such a fun, exciting opportunity. It's never going to stop, which is why, like, you've really got to just cut things down to the core and say, what is actually important to me? Yeah. Not what is everybody telling me what's important, but what is actually important to me. And you might find out you're with the wrong person. You might find out you're living in the wrong location. You'll probably find out you're working in the wrong job if you have a job. You'll come to a realization of, okay, I've been going in the wrong direction for a really long time now. It's time to shift, and it's going to be hard and painful and tough, but at least I can wake up in the morning now knowing that I'm headed in the right direction.
I think that's huge. And I know even in my own life, I've gone in cycles where I kind of like reassess, reoptimize what I'm working on. But what I find really difficult is there's the fallacy, I guess, or the sunk cost. Like, oh, well, I've already spent so much time doing this, and if you realize it's not the thing or what really, as you mentioned, is best for you, and it's what other people want of you or something like that, that can be really hard. Have you ever run into that sort of thing, or have you been pretty good at just, cutting, changing direction?
Do you know how many unhappy lawyers there are? Countless. And every one of those lawyers, if they're being truthful, will look at you and say, I hated the first semester of law school. I hated all of law school, but I really hated the first semester. And I knew at that moment, this was not for me. But I had taken the LSATs, I had gotten the loan, I had invested in law school. Everybody was so excited and proud of me because I was in law school. And so I just stayed in law school. And I stayed in law school, so then I became a lawyer. And then I became a lawyer, so now I'm a lawyer. And now I'm 55, I'm out of shape, I'm unhealthy, I'm unhappy. And this is my life. That's happened to countless lawyers, nurses, doctors. And I'm not just picking on like those professions, a lot of professions.
Sure.
But I am specifically picking on lawyers, to be honest, because they are the worst. And I can actually say that because I went to law school.
Sure.
And I hated law school. And in the first semester, I said, I am so unhappy. I see my future, but I've already spent $20,000 and growing on my tuition bill. And I literally had to like look in the mirror and physically slap myself in the face and say, what are you doing? You are going down this path because of this sunk cost fallacy that you don't recognize that every day is a brand new day. Every day is a day that you can decide what you're going to do, and it should not be impacted by the day before at all. And when I finally had that attitude, and I actually read the book Eat, Pray, Love, which helped at that time, I actually quit law school, went to India for 4 months to just disappear, and I came back with just a new attitude, and it was a huge help. So there's a lot of people listening right now, or know people that should be listening right now that are living a life because of sunk costs, and that's really sad.
Yeah.
I what I'm hearing you say is it's okay to reinvent yourself, and especially the time we're in the world.
I think it's necessary to reinvent yourself. I mean, when you reinvent yourself and you discover that you're on the right path, that's even more exciting.
Yeah.
Because then you're really justifying your daily actions.
Awesome.
So maybe in wrapping up, do you have like a podcast, a book, piece of content outside of yours that you would recommend that somebody listen or read to get to that next level?
I'm going to pick one that I doubt has ever been or will ever be recommended on your show, just because I want to be unique. And it goes along a lot with what we've been talking about right now, which is just if you wake up every day and you just do the little things right, they might seem very little at the time, and they are, and they might seem like they're not adding up, but they are. Over time, the compound effect has an amazing benefit to what you're doing. And that book is called The Slight Edge by Jeff Olson. And that book really helped me when I was waking up, just doing a podcast every day that nobody was listening to. It's easy to get frustrated and say, I'm just not making any progress. It's been months. I'm going to give up. That's what millions of people are doing every day. And their unrealized success will always be that, unrealized. I, thanks to books like that and mindsets like that, said, you know what? I'm only going to focus on what I can focus on. Every day, wake up, do something positive in the direction that I know I want to go forward in. And guess what? I woke up 2 years later and I was running a multi-million-dollar business. But that almost didn't happen, because if you had asked me two years prior, I would have said, man, if I can just make $5,000 a month doing this, which would have been fantastic, I'll be the happiest person in the world. And I just kept getting up every day and doing that.
That's awesome. Wise words from JLD. Thank you for tuning in, everyone. This was great. We'll have to come back and check how things are going after the baby comes. That'll be exciting. I'm sure there will be some other tips on that front too. So a couple things on this. We saw a few things that John's created and pushed out to the world in the past, and we want to try something new. So I want all of you who have watched this, jump in the comments, share something that you've learned or that struck you, that stood out.
An uncommon insight.
Yeah, an uncommon insight that you derived from this podcast. Or if you see others that you really liked, go ahead and click on that, give them a like, give us a like and a follow. If we get at least 100 comments or more, we're gonna give out some of these books to those people who have been sharing their insights as well. So let's get at least 100 comments, and we'll be sharing that with everyone.
And all the links for what he referred to as the Podcaster Paradise and the other books will be linked below. Make it easy on that front. Thank you again for inviting us into your house. What a great experience. If it's definitely one of those episodes you're gonna have to listen twice to get all the truth bombs from it. But thank you again, and signing off to the next time.
All right, like, subscribe. See you later.